The Walten Files is easily one of the faces of analog horror, and as a nerd for this series, I'll be ranking every episode of the Walten Files. Welcome to the Sir Chris Plus channel. I know, a very original name, am I right? I'm Sir Chris, and on this channel, I post whatever I want. So let's begin. This tier list goes from absolute cinema to... In this tier list, I will analyze the videos from the main channel, as well as some videos from channels linked to the story. Also, I'll be breaking the episodes down into important parts, while cutting some of them to save you guys time. We begin with nothing more and nothing less than the company introductory tape. Or at least with the new version, since the episode had to be deleted due to copyright claims. Company introductory tape is one of the most important because it established the foundation of the lore that we know today. And in case you're one of the people who doesn't know about the lore, I see you, okay? I can hear you breathing. Jokes aside, you'll get to know it here. Company introductory tape tells us about the ambition of two best buddies, Jack Walten and Felix Kranken, to open a restaurant with robots to entertain the public, which eventually becomes reality with the help of Cyberfun Tech, who ends up investing in their company, Bunny Smiles Incorporated. And so, Bon's Burgers opens in Brighton on June 28th of 1974. The mystery begins from the moment that Jack Walten, one of the founders, mysteriously disappears on June 11th of 1974, and the restaurant closes only 22 days later, for a reason that I will tell you in a bit. Eventually, the company buys a bunker in St. Juan Forest to store everything that belonged to the previous Bon's Burgers, where a caretaker would be hired to perform maintenance on the animatronics, you know, just to check out and see if everything is working fine. And that poor soul was Brian Stills, where on his first day, he ends up going to the bunker, and after seeing that Bon was acting weird and creepy, he starts running. Smart, but he ends up getting killed by Bon. Poor Brian, man, he seemed so happy in the photo. The remake of this episode made it a little bit better, as the old version had fewer scenes, but nothing crazy. One of the reasons why the Walten Files caught my attention was because of the storytelling, and the fact that there are no giant big blocks of text. With that, it deserves the good tier. Following this tape, we have the Relocate Project. Relocate Project continues 4 years after the closure of the Bon's Burgers restaurant, and it's from this episode that things start to get interesting. In this episode, the company, in this case Felix, proceeds with the Relocate Project, which consisted of reprogramming all the animatronics to use them again in the new Bon's Burgers restaurant. On this tape, we discover that Jack was not the only one to disappear, but he was the first. And it shows us 3 more victims: Rosemary Walten, Jack's wife, and the restaurant's artist, Susan Woodings, and Ashley Parks, 2 employees. Susan disappears on June 30th of 1974, but now how, it doesn't show in this episode. But she eventually gets attacked by Bon and gets stuffed inside Benny while still alive, and eventually dies from the injuries and starvation. Rosemary gets ripped apart by Bon in the backstage, and he puts her inside Shaw on July 19th of 1974. And Ashley dies in the back door of the bunker after listening to the tape recorded by Felix, which had the names of the victims, on July 13th of 1978. And did you guys know that somebody created a real obituary for Rosemary Walten? Like, let that sink in for a moment. If we compare this episode with the previous one, the Relocate Project ends up being better, and I still can't put my finger on why. Maybe because this video brought a little bit more value, since it shows us more characters, dates, and how they eventually died, and that's why this one is going to the bottom of the amazing tier for now. After this, we have the Lucky You. We finally reached the first unlisted video of this series. Lucky You is one of the simplest tapes, honestly. It reveals photos with dates and also hints that the next episode would focus on a specific character, Sophie Walten, the daughter of Jack and Rosemary, who after losing her family, ends up getting antidepressants or some sort of pills that eventually make her memories fuzzy. There's not much to say about this episode, it doesn't bring that much value, and for that, goes to the could be better tier. And just a reminder, just because something is in this tier, doesn't mean that I hate it. The Showstoppers 1 and 2. The Showstoppers. I don't have anything to say about it. The Showstoppers is the name of the music albums created by the former band, the Ponzis, who ended up working with PSI. Both albums are considered in the lore as lost media, as stated by Anthony, the guy who is uploading the tapes to the main channel. There are 18 songs in total, but there are a few more uploads on the channel Felix Complex K9. Don't get me wrong, the songs are good, and I'm honestly surprised that Martin has even managed to capture the improvement in quality over the years, since the first album was in the 70s and the most recent one is in the 80s. The most interesting thing about them is that there are songs that talk about the character's backstory, like the song that Rosemary made talking about how she and Jack met, and even one about the Shadow Man, who still needs to be confirmed as to who he is. But listen, I can speculate with every single fiber of my body that he's Felix, okay? Both are important to the world building of the story, but they go to the tier. I have nothing against it, but compared to the previous ones, they are not important. With that aside, let's move on to the ticking clock. The ticking clock is a self-explanatory video. The ticking clock is a video from the channel Cy05, and it was posted 1 month before Bunnyfarm. And it just shows the clock ticking. I guess you already know where this one is going. Now, we move on to my favorite tape of the first 3. Bunnyfarm. Ooh, we have a lot to talk about. Bunnyfarm is the only episode for now that has almost 1 hour. The episode focuses specifically on Sophie and Jenny, but mainly on Sophie. Jenny ends up showing Sophie one of the few machines that were distributed around Brighton by BSI in 1982, where that one was in the basement of a hotel. This episode takes place over 2 consecutive days, where Sophie plays each animatronics minigame and discovers who was put inside of each costume. Billy's was Ashley, Benny's was Susan, Boozoo's was Charles, and Shaw's was Rosemary. In the middle of her gameplay, we were able to read Linda's journal, Felix's wife, in which she says that Felix's addiction has gotten worse to the point where he stays at the warehouse just with the intention of drinking. This is no exaggeration, okay? Because even the employees in a later tape assume that Felix is somewhere around town drinking while his wife was worried about him. Come on. Sophie eventually begins to remember who the victims were, and with that, the machine possessed by the spirits of the victims shows Sophie the beginning of those tragedies on May 2nd of 1974. By connecting the dots, that's the same day where Linda ends up leaving Felix because of his uncontrollable addiction, which obviously leaves him shaken. That same day, Jack was busy with company's paperwork and he had no one to take his children to a school party. So with that, Jack calls Felix, which Felix says yes, probably to feel a bit better about himself. He then got drunk and killed both of the kids in a car accident. And the episode ends with Jack, who has called Felix several times, asking about his children. And with the fact that after waiting for Sophie, 8 years later, the victim's story is finally heard. Absolute cinema. I don't care. This episode is the first one that makes a lot of points start to make sense, and even gave us a good meme. Hit them, Zach.
Think I'm stupid or something? Sex.
He doesn't know you, little bro. A lot of people tend to not like this episode very much because it's huge, and I honestly understand, even though it wasn't a problem for me. Especially because when you're playing a game for the first time, you tend to explore and take things slow, and she did that. But now, we move on to the second unlisted video. Guilty. Guilty, as I said before, is another secret video, and it's kinda similar to Lucky You. Both begin by showing pictures of the company, but the tip eventually focuses on one character, this one being Felix, before and after the accident. And to be honest, this one got to me a little bit. Felix's addiction has reached a worrying point where he carries a tape recorder with him, since when he gets drunk, he thinks that whatever he did or went through was nothing more than a dream. In this episode, we can hear and understand that Felix is not a cold killer, but rather a person who made many bad decisions, and unfortunately, it only took a combination of factors to destroy his entire life. And I kinda feel bad for the guy, and a big part of it is due to the voice acting. Good tier. Now to light up the mood a little bit, the Plush advertisements. Amazing tier? Hey, put down the pitchforks. Let me explain. One thing about these advertisements is that they feel totally real. I can easily imagine these advertisements actually airing in the universe of the Walten Files. Sure, they might not bring much value compared to the others, but these advertisements help show that the company is trying to pick things up, especially after the bad times. Since the advertisements take place in 1982, and Benny being the comic relief of these ads never gets old. I'll not be including the Bontergeist on this one since Martin said specifically that that one is not canon. With this, we move on to Ponzi's Please Please Me. You might be thinking, another music? And you're right, but this was actually the last recording of a session that the band Ponzi's did for BSI in 1983. You know, the band that made the music for both the Showstoppers albums. At the end of the song Please Please Me, from the channel Felix Complex K9, we can hear a discussion between William and Felix, in which William accuses Felix of the following.
So you're just gonna up and leave like that? You're gonna
Yeah,
leave.
maybe you should have thought about that before you killed.
It is important because it reinforces that the conspiracies even affected those who worked for Felix, making the story more credible, and finally someone is catching up on his lie. Because it's music, it deserves to be on the tier, but since it brought a cool detail, it kinda redeemed itself. It's going to the could be better tier. And now we have Spectacle. Spectacle is short but sweet. We can see that Spectacle is just a mini episode focused once again on world building. It's just a news report talking about Bond's Burgers 4 months after it closed. Probably as a late Halloween special. I mean, it was around November in the lore, so I don't know. This news report talks about the backstory of the establishment and the paranormal and strange incidents that have occurred since the restaurant opened. From loud music in the middle of the night hours after they have closed, lights being on at late hours, to even the soul of the dead employees hunting the place. Ooh. It's fake, right? This tape thankfully gives us the final piece that we needed, which was the reason why they closed. The murder of Rosemary at around 2 to 3 AM. That the screams shocked the neighborhood and the following police raid at 4 AM, as stated by Richie. But unfortunately the police found nothing, and they allegedly closed for monetary reasons. Honestly, this mini episode is short but has good information, and not to mention the difference in quality. Amazing tier. Lacrimosa. This is my favorite of the hidden videos. In Lacrimosa, it tells us more about the Cyberfun console, which was present in each animatronic. That same console was responsible for movements, interactions with the public, map tracking, and even remembering the faces of specific people. This episode is essential as it confirms the possibility that Bond was programmed to attack the victims. And this possibility even makes more sense if we combine Brian's last sentence with the following piece of text. This technology is still a little faulty, which means a person could easily be mistaken by someone else. This episode is more of a teaser of what's coming, and through it, we can trust that the next episode will have horrific visuals. I mean, look at this. And this. And the description is... oh my word. This one is the strongest in the amazing tier. And for the last one, we have Cyberfun Tech. The best episode so far. Even though this episode is 36 minutes long, I can summarize it pretty quickly. Cyberfun Tech goes around the dates that we already know, and specifically, this episode fills the gap we had between the accident on May 2nd until Jack's disappearance on June 11th. In the middle of the night of May 3rd, Jack ended up going to the police station to file his 2 kids as missing. Later that same morning, Felix ends up turning himself in at the same police station and ends up going to custody and ends up lying. He tells the police that after the accident, he was unconscious for 20 minutes, and when he woke up, Head and Molly had ran off. I assume they end up letting him go, because there is not enough evidence to arrest him. I also say this because on May 5th, he ends up telling this same story to Jack and Rosemary, who obviously hate him. Further on, we can hear that the funeral that took place for both of them was a closed casket, and after that, Jack ends up being absent for an undetermined amount of time. And also, this tape tells us that there is one more stage between life and death, the Wonderland, a place where one's soul is sent to when their body is dead but the soul is alive, as a way to give them a new body since the soul wouldn't survive without a vessel. I don't need to tell you guys that this one goes to the absolute cinema. Like, the quality of this one is stunning. It even makes the others seem like a joke. But to be fair, it's a gap of 3 years, and a lot changes and improves in such a big gap. To justify what I said in the beginning of this tape, first, the quality. Second, the value that it brings. Because like, bro, it closed such a big gap that we had in the story. And with that, we finished the tier list. If you're still watching until the very end, I'm surprised. I tend to yap a lot, especially when the topic is about the Walten Files. If there's anything that you disagree with me, tell me. I would honestly love to read your opinion. And yeah, the Walten Files may be the best that analog horror can offer. I had to cut a lot while I was explaining the tapes, so if you're interested in seeing the story in detail, check out the main channel and follow my socials. Love you guys, and until next time, take care.